Welcome to AntArctic Stories, a podcast that takes you behind the scenes into the rich world of people who live, work, and undertake daring expeditions in the polar regions. My name is Heather Thorkelson, and I'll be your host today. Jerome Viard grew up in France before moving to Cambridge in the United Kingdom 13 years ago. He embarked on a career as a chef, going on to become head pastry chef at some of the best hotels in Cambridge. In 2015, he traveled to South Georgia as a member of the South Georgia Heritage Trust Habitat Restoration Field Team as a cook during the eradication of the invasive rats and mice from the island. Like most visitors to South Georgia, he fell in love at first sight with the island and was blown away by its wildlife, landscape, cultural heritage, and the community life on base. He described his time on the island as, quote, the best time of my life. A couple of years later, unable to shake the pull of this remote jewel of an island, Jerome headed back to spend a second season on South Georgia, this time working at the museum in Grytviken and supporting the work of the South Georgia Heritage Trust. When Jerome is not busy working in hot kitchens, he enjoys being outdoors, gardening, sailing, and participating in conservation projects. Jerome Viard, welcome to AntArctic Stories.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm really excited to speak with you because you are the first person that I've gotten a chance to ask about being involved in the rat eradication program on South Georgia. So you have a very interesting background because you went from being a head pastry chef in a 4-star hotel in Newmarket in the UK to working on the rat eradication team in the very remote wilds of South Georgia. So you gotta share with us. I mean, when this opportunity came up to make such a dramatic change and go on such a big adventure, what made you decide to take it?
Well, at the time, I was, like you said, working in a 4-star hotel. It is a very busy place, and at the time, I was working very long hours and making pastries and desserts all day long until very late in the evening, working a lot, facing a wall in a corridor. And then when that opportunity came up to go to South Georgia, I just thought, I'm going to take it. You know, I need the adventure. I need a change. I need some fresh air. And so I took that opportunity.
Oh, that's so cool. So obviously you're a chef, you can cook, but what exactly was your role as part of the rat eradication team?
So I was one of the chefs. We were 2 chefs working for the rat team, as we were called. And I was also a field assistant. So I helped baiting and doing anything, you know, on the field.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. So you had a 2-pronged role. It sounds like you were quite busy.
Yes, very busy. It was literally working 7 days a week all the time because, you know, you need to feed these people every day, all day. And when they work hard outside, they eat a lot.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah. How many people were on the team?
We were 20 people. So we had a doctor, we had map specialists, helicopter pilots, 2 chefs. So quite a varied team from New Zealand, Australia, Britain, and obviously me, as you've probably noticed my accent, a Frenchman.
Yeah, the French contingent. And so how long was your contract on this project? Because the project was a multi-year project, but how long were you down there for?
Yeah, so the project was 3 years of baiting, so 3 different seasons, and I was part of the last season in 2015, the 3rd season.
Okay.
And that was for 5 months.
5 months.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, so 5 months assisting the team, cooking. It's a good thing there were 2 of you because feeding 20 people, 3 meals a day, that sounds pretty hectic.
Yeah.
What was it like to cook in a place like that where there's no grocery stores or anything?
So that was a very big difference, from going from a professional kitchen in a 4-star hotel where you've got big ovens and all the equipment you need, and you've got fresh deliveries every day, suppliers coming through the door every day, all the equipment you need, to going to South Georgia, where I was cooking basically with a home oven. So the same oven you would have in your home, and the door was broken, so no glass panel. Instead, they had put a metal sheet instead of the glass, so I couldn't even see inside. And that was quite difficult because I was not used to that setting, and at first I was burning a lot of cakes, and I was saying to myself, I was very frustrated because I wanted to show off and be able to say, look, I'm a good pastry chef, I'm gonna make you amazing cakes. And instead I was burning them because, well, the oven wasn't very well calibrated, so it was burning at the top and being raw at the bottom, so it was quite challenging. But what I really appreciated is, because we're all on a remote island together, people know that you can't achieve the things that you would achieve in normal society with all the equipments you need. So people were very grateful for my burnt cakes, and I quickly learned how to adjust the temperatures and where to put my cakes inside the oven and so on. So I had to adapt. In terms of food itself, same again, like I said, we didn't get any fresh food every day like you would here. Instead, dry food was only once a year. So all your tins, your frozen food, your dry food, all that came once a year. And the fresh produce, it was every 6 weeks, or when we were lucky and some cruise ships had some spare fruits and veg, sometimes we had some care package, and it was really nice actually to get some fresh fruits. So it was quite challenging also, because I had to deal with things I've never cooked before, or making milk out of powder. In the real world, you use fresh milk. You don't use milk powder, but all of a sudden I had to use milk powder. I had to use tinned potatoes. I had to use frozen beef and frozen chicken and dried onions, all these kind of items that I wasn't used to. And also we had such a big quantity of everything. I had so many pulses. For example, I remember having tens of kilos of chickpeas, and you had to be very imaginative to come up with recipes and ideas to do with all these pulses, because that's why they keep for a long time. So that's why we had so much.
They keep for a long time, and they're also filling when you're trying to feed a lot of people. So that's handy. But I can imagine that ingredients like powdered milk, I mean, does that even behave the same way as fresh milk when you're cooking or when you're making pastries?
It's actually pretty good and very versatile. It depends on the amount of water you put in it. So, if you want to make more a creamy milk, you put less water, and that's how you can achieve, things. We also had powdered cream, so just add a bit of water and then whip it. All these different powders and tricks, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember a few years ago, I was sailing down on one of the expedition ships working, and we were carrying some staff that were heading down to Grytviken for a season. And I was asking them about the food, and I said, what do you miss most? Like, what can't you get for the 6 months that you're going to be there? And they were sharing a bit of information, and then they said, we can't get cheese. Like, we have cheese, but it's frozen cheese. And I was like, no. I can't live without cheese.
Well, everything is frozen, and the cheese, frozen cheese doesn't act the same way when it's defrosted. It just crumbles, and it's not the same texture.
Yeah, it's like cheese tragedy.
But to be honest, you get used to it, and because of the place where you are, it's worth it. I don't mind having crumbly frozen cheese, despite the fact I'm a Frenchman and I love cheese, because I look outside my window and I see penguins. You see what I mean?
Yeah, of course. And it's
worth
temporary.
it. It's worth the frozen cheese.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, this brings up another question for me. What are you most proud of having cooked or baked while in South Georgia?
I'd say there is this thing that I cooked. Basically, we trapped a rat that we didn't bait, so in a trap, and the doctor showed me how to skin it. So it was very interesting in a kind of anatomy, medical way. So I skinned the rat, and then I thought, oh, well, I've got this flesh now. What am I going to do with it? So I decided to cook it. And I thought, if we're going to kill all these rats, let's embrace the whole thing and like do something respectful as well. We kill them, but let's honor one of them. And so I prepared it and I marinated it in wine.
Nice.
Because I didn't know what it would taste like as well. So I did it a bit like a coq au vin, but it was using rats, or rat au vin. Marinated it and then stewed and then served with mashed potatoes, little carrots. It obviously there's not much meat on a rat, and it's full of little tiny bones. It's a bit like rabbit, really.
Oh, interesting.
But on the plate, it looked really nice. And yes, it was tasty.
I like that. I mean, I think it's nice that you had a little homage to the rat, a little rat respect.
Yes.
That's very cool. Very cool. And probably not something that you had planned to do on the way down, but...
No. There are many things I didn't plan to do. Well, to be honest, I didn't even know where South Georgia was, and I said, yes, I'd go on an adventure. Yes, please. But I was so busy at work, I didn't do that much research. I did a quick Google picture search and I thought, wow, there's snow, some penguins and seals somewhere there, not many buildings. But it really hit me when I arrived, really. That's when I realized, oh, wow, I am in a special place.
Yeah.
But before that, I didn't know anything about South Georgia.
Yeah, I think that's true for many people, even people who plan to travel there as a tourist. You see the pictures and you see where it is on the map. And it's not until you actually get there that you're like, oh, this is a different world almost. Yes. And it's so remote, Yeah. It's quite exceptional.
And the sheer amount of wildlife is just breathtaking. Yeah. And we're not used to it, You can go to a zoo and see penguins, but when you go down there and you see them like walking around you and they don't care about you, they just treat you as another creature, come and check you out. And to me, that was amazing to be able to be so close to the animals and they don't feel frightened. And there are just so many.
Just so many. Well, there's basically no humans messing with them. So they're left to multiply and do well in their natural environment, which is really cool. And What a privilege to go and be a part of, right? So the rat eradication project, for people who don't know, I'll let you talk a little bit about it, but basically it was, the main thing is that these rats, which had been brought down by humans in the past, largely on whaling ships, were decimating the pipit population, this endemic little bird that lives on the island there. So the rat eradication project was really a necessary evil for, making sure that the species that belonged on the islands didn't disappear for good. So can you talk a little bit more about that? And also, like, logistically, how do you eradicate rats from a place that is just so massive mountain peaks, big fjords? And I mean, they're rats. They're kind of hard to get to.
Yes. So the rats actually came first on the sealing ships. So the first the sealers came to kill the seals and get the blubber and the oil and the pelt as well.
Right.
And then that was in the 18th century. And then in the 19th century, the whalers came and they brought with them as well rats and mice and also reindeer and plants, invasive plants like the dandelion we see everywhere on South Georgia now. So when these ships came, they brought the rats with them, they settled and multiplied, and the rats had food very, very easily accessible, because our birds on South Georgia, they all nest on the ground or underground. There are no trees, so it was just an open buffet for them. When the whalers left 250 years later, the rats stayed, and they just kept on eating and eating and decimating more and more of them, little seabirds, And it's not just the pipit, the South Georgia pipit, which is an endemic bird, the most southerly song bird on the planet. We also have the South Georgia pintail, and also many little petrels and prions that suffered a lot from the rats, because they are small burrowing birds, and they were so easy to be preyed on. So seeing the bird population, going down, and seeing that on the main island, all these species were almost extinct. The pipit, you couldn't find it on the main island. You had to go to these little islets around South Georgia where there were no rats to see pipits. So in 2008, the charity South Georgia Heritage Trust decided to take on this massive task, because the government of South Georgia knew there was a problem. They knew there were rats and a problem with the bird population there, but it's such a massive logistical endeavor that they couldn't do it on their own. So South Georgia Heritage Trust, which is a charity, decided to take on the project, and it took 10 years, for the whole project to be completed, and 4 field seasons, and 3 out of 4 field seasons, 3 of them were baiting seasons. So like you mentioned earlier, South Georgia, the terrain is very difficult. You've got mountains, you've got glaciers. The rats were concentrated in the northwest part of the island, because that's where the whaling stations were. And the rest of the island is covered by permanent ice, and the rats don't survive in permanent ice. They need, they can survive a bit of snow during the winter, but they also need food, and that food is where the birds are nesting. So the area that was baited was divided in 3. We had 3 baiting seasons, and we used helicopters to reach, these areas all over the coastline. So basically, we used poison pellets made in the USA by Bell Laboratories. It's a molecule called brodifacoum. It's an anticoagulant, so it acts on the blood of the rats once they eat it. And so what happened was, we took the bait all over the island by boat. We dropped it in like forward bases,
Okay.
with the fuel for the helicopters as well.
Yeah.
Because, we couldn't go from base all over the island. It was just too far for the helicopters. So we had to have bases, depots all over the coastline. And from there, we flew to these bases every day, loaded the bait in the bucket under the helicopter, and then the helicopter was flying in very tight transects. The pilots were following very strict lines on the map to make sure that the whole terrain was covered in bait.
Wow.
And that's how we did it. Bait was spread, a bit more where there was a lot of vegetation, and a bit less where there was not so much vegetation. So logistically, that's how we did it. And how did we manage to bait the whole island? Well, we're very lucky, because South Georgia is divided with glaciers that are permanent, and they divided the island in zones that the rats couldn't cross. So when we baited one zone between 2 glaciers, we knew that zone couldn't be re-invaded by rats, because the rats couldn't cross that zone.
Right.
But time was of the essence, because, as you know, there is the climate is changing. Our glaciers are also melting very fast. Some of them at a rate of 2 meters per day. And if we waited any longer, the rats could, just travel the whole coastline up and down, and that would be just too big of an area to bait in one go.
That's such a good point. I hadn't actually thought about that, but you were really in a race against time. Yeah.
Yes. That's why we needed to do it then, and that's why it worked really. And we did it in 3 seasons, and in between each seasons we had 2 years to be able to raise more money for bait and to see what impact we did, on the rats and also on the other species.
Yeah, because you're obviously monitoring bird populations and things like that to see if they're bouncing back at the same time, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so cool. It hadn't even occurred to me that you would have put out depots, but it's very much reminiscent of like the old explorer days, like when the explorers were trying to get to the South Pole and they'd go and lay out depots ahead so that they could refuel and all that kind of thing. So that's a really cool.
And you have to be prepared as well, because the weather is just so unpredictable in South Georgia. You had to make sure that on some of his depots you had food, for example, because what if you couldn't fly back?
Yeah.
You needed food, you needed water, you needed shelter.
Yeah.
So,
If you get stranded, because I mean, helicopters are pretty vulnerable, right? In a place like that, if the weather turns.
Exactly. As soon as it gets a bit foggy, you can't see the mountains anymore. And it's not a territory where people are used to flying around.
No, definitely not. So that actually brings me to my next question, because South Georgia is so exposed. And, even if the weather is fine and clear, still sometimes the winds are absolutely bananas. And, sometimes it's just not possible to do helicopter operations. So what did the team do on those days where you were just stuck?
So, yes, these days, and actually these days turned into weeks sometimes. And it was very tough because we knew we had a very short time frame to bait, before the winter came, and then the weather became more and more difficult to work with. So we knew we had this window. We were on South Georgia, we had to bait. So every time we were stuck at base was quite stressful, and people didn't know what to do. So how did we occupy ourselves? We did a lot of table tennis tournaments, and people were reading or watching films or just try to pass the time. And also my role as a chef was to entertain them, because the main question I got almost every day was, what's for dinner? What's for dinner? So it was something to look forward to. And when you're stuck in a building because you can't work, you look forward to your meals. So that was my job also, to try and entertain through food and do some theme nights and do some special meals and do cookery lessons and teach people how to make bread, for example. Try to engage.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I can totally imagine what that scenario would be like. And I can't believe I didn't ask you this, but when you say, when you're stuck on base, you were stuck in Grytviken, right? You were staying in the community there?
No, we were staying in King Edward Point, actually.
Okay.
Grytviken is the museum.
Yep.
And for Rat Team, we were based in one of the buildings at King Edward Point. So down the track, just across the cove. Yes.
Which is just like a 20-minute walk away, really.
Yes.
Yeah, cool. For anyone who doesn't know South Georgia, it's basically just a 20-minute walk between the two.
Yes, and the helipad was actually in Grytviken.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Cool. So, given that the team had to distribute rat poison in multiple fjords, as you say, in 3 different zones, you must have seen corners of South Georgia that even the tourist expedition ships can't get to, because there's sort of a limited number of landing sites that even ships, coming in by water can actually access. So what is it like to experience this kind of nature that's so remote that you're literally one of the few humans that ever gets to see it up close?
Yeah, I feel very, very grateful for that. And I think I was very lucky. I am pretty sure that the places we went to, I was probably me and my colleagues were the only human beings to ever, walked on this patch of land on South Georgia, because there is no reason why people would come here. There is not a whaling station. There is not a beach to land on. It's just a flat bit where we could put the helicopter, So I don't see why people would have come here, and it's quite far from anything. So it feels really special, and I do realize that it's a very special opportunity that I got. I can remember one very, very special flight. We were doing some monitoring back where they were baiting in phase 1 in King Archan Bay. So for those who know Shackleton, that's where he landed with his little boat, the James Caird, and to go and get help. And so I was very lucky because we flew the helicopter from King Haakon Bay to Stromness. So basically following the footsteps of Shackleton across South Georgia, and seeing that from above was just mind-blowing, seeing the expanse of ice and snow, the cracks in the glaciers. It was just amazing. You could see the tips of the mountains just burrowed in snow. It was just incredible.
Wow, that sounds like something else. And I mean, seeing it from above and then imagining not only Shackleton's men crossing back in the day when they had really like crappy gear, but even there are people...
And no map, yeah.
And no map, yeah, exactly. But even the people who have crossed more recently, I mean, there are expeditions that take mountaineers across and do it now. Just understanding that you're looking down on a spot that people have traversed. I mean, it must be really breathtaking / terrifying.
Yes, I felt, very scared for Shackleton when he crossed that land, because like you said, we have expeditions these days doing the crossing, but many of these expeditions don't go to the end. People turn back because the weather's too bad, and the odd accident,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Shackleton, he didn't have that luxury though. It was like they had to cross or that was the end of them, right?
Exactly. And seeing the whaling stations from above as well, flying above Stromness, is just incredible to see the size of the whaling station, like a little city. It was just very, very pictures that I will never forget.
Oh, I can imagine. I'm so envious in a good way. It just sounds like such an incredible experience to have been through. So, you were part of the rat eradication project, and then you went back home to the UK, but then you returned to South Georgia a couple of years later in a different capacity. So what kind of work were you doing then? And of course, this is probably a stupid question, but why did you decide to go back?
It's not a stupid question. Well, so when I returned to the UK, I returned to my corridor making pastries for very long hours. And to be honest, all I was thinking about every day was South Georgia and the experience I just witnessed. But, I told myself, listen, they don't need a chef anymore down there. You're a chef, so you will never be able to go back. So I was trying to make peace with that. It was an amazing experience, and that's it. Now you need to get back to your cooking, to your saucepans and your whisks, and that's it. But like you said, once you've been to these places, once you've experienced the beauty of such a wild place, it's stuck. It's in your brain. And every day I was thinking about it, even when I was brushing my teeth. Every time I was brushing my teeth, I was thinking about South Georgia. Why? Because I thought, oh my God, if I get to go again, I need to have really good teeth. I cannot go to Antarctica or to South Georgia with bad teeth. So every time I was brushing my teeth, I was thinking about South Georgia. And then I was thinking, well, when I was working as a chef on South Georgia for the RAT project, in my split shift or in my spare time, not that I had much spare time anyway, I used to go to the museum across to Great Viken and give a hand, and just to do something different, just to see different people and talk about different things. It's good. It feels good to. I know it's not that far, but it felt like going somewhere.
Yeah, for sure.
And you can't go to the cinema, or you can't go to bowling, so you just go to the nearest museum, and I just lended a hand and helped out doing various things. I folded a lot of t-shirts for them, and I really enjoyed it. So I thought, well, why not drop a line to the museum director and say, hey, remember me? I would like to come back and be part of your museum team, if that would be possible. And basically that's what happened. I did some work experience here in the UK as a shop assistant. I worked in the charity shop as well as working in the kitchen, just to gain that experience dealing with customers and the till and the shop. And with my experience of South Georgia the first time, I got the job, and I became a museum assistant for one season.
That's so good. I mean, of course, it makes sense that they're going to very much favor people who have experience of the island and understand what life is like there, because it's not for everybody, right? I mean,
No, it is pretty tough.
It's tough. It's remote. You don't have like internet on demand.
No, the internet is really bad, and privacy as well.
Yeah.
You share everything.
Yeah.
Share everything. And you miss your friends, you miss your family, and
Yeah.
the internet, like you said, is not that great. The phone is not that great. So you have to be able to cope with that.
Yeah, you have to be able to cope with that for sure. So what would you say? I mean, I suppose the main thing would be that you were primarily stuck in Grytviken and surrounding area, but what were the major differences in, your experience in South Georgia the second time around from the first?
The main difference was that for my first job, because I was a chef and I was also a field assistant, I had to work 7 days a week, and feed these people every day. They needed feeding. And like I said, we were on a very tight timeline. We had to bait. So there was not much time to go and explore around. So the second time around, when I was there as a museum assistant, we tried to get 2 days off during the week, and that enabled me to go and explore the peninsula, the Thatcher Peninsula. And there are some really, really awesome hikes to do, and you've got many mountains to climb and peaks and lakes to go, and
Wow.
There are just so many places to explore within the boundaries, the travel zone, as it's called.
Mm-hmm.
So the main difference was I got a lot more opportunities to go and see what was around. The first time I saw a lot outside of King Edward Point and Grytviken. So like I said, I saw things that not many people have seen.
Mm-hmm.
But the second time I got to explore in depth my neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And probably more time to, like on a hike, you could go and sit up on a viewpoint and just be for a while.
Or take a tent and go camping for a weekend, or go and sleep in one of the research huts,
Yeah.
I had the time to do that.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. It sounds really, really nice. So that leads me to my next question, which is, what memory from South Georgia stands out for you the most, or in other words, what moment took your breath away?
I have two memories, I would say. The first one was when I arrived on the first day in that January 2015. So I came down from Falkland Islands on the RRS Shackleton. That took 3 days of quite rough seas to come down to South Georgia. And I woke up, and there it was. South Georgia was there outside. Very snowy mountains, very dramatic landscapes. And when we arrived at the jetty at King Edward Point, that's the moment that, my heart kind of exploded, because I looked down the gangway, and there were penguins standing up, king penguins standing up there, and fur seal pups everywhere, just playing in the water, around the jetty.
Yeah.
And to me, that just blew my head off. I didn't expect that at all. I thought I would see maybe some penguins and maybe some seals somewhere on South Georgia, but I didn't expect them to be right at the bottom of the ship, and where I was about to spend, 5 months living there. I could hear the elephant seal snoring at night outside my window.
Yeah.
So that is the memory, that's real. That's a realization. And the second one was even better in a way. We had one of them forward bases to be able to go and bait the very tip at the south of the island. We had to have another base midway with tents and cooking facilities and everything we needed, fuel and bait and food. And so for a week, I went there cooking for the team. And with us, we had a couple of Germans that were doing a documentary on the rat eradication project. So they were following us everywhere with their camera gear. And one day, so everyone went baiting, and I was, left behind. I made my dinner; it was all ready, and the crew, the cameraman asked me, "Do you want to come with me? I'm going to do some photo shoots nearby." I said, "Yeah, okay." He said, "Okay, you'll have to carry my camera." I said, "No problem. I carry anything you'd like." His camera was very heavy because it's the proper thing, and also very expensive. So,
don't drop it.
don't trip over anything, and don't go sliding down the snow with the very expensive camera in your backpack. So anyway, we started hiking, I should say. There's no walking on South Georgia; it's all hiking. And we hiked, and then it started snowing. And then we went up. And then I reached the end. And as I looked down, to be honest, I could hear it before I saw it. We reached Gold Harbour. And I never seen anything like that. Penguins, millions and millions of king penguins and chicks just on that beach, you couldn't see the end of it. And to me, that was mind-blowing. I've never seen so many penguins in one site.
Yeah.
And we went all the way down, and so the cameraman started filming what he had to film, the penguins and the snow. It was so beautiful. And I was just left there. So I had my camera, and I just went off and started taking so many photos. I just couldn't stop taking photos. And you had, Gold Harbour is my favorite place, because you've got that hanging glacier in the black background, and you've got, like I said, millions of penguins and the chicks in the middle, and massive elephant seals and fur seals. And on that beach, I saw three out of the 5 species of penguins on South Georgia, all in one spot, which, I've never seen a chin-strap penguin before. I saw one there, and it was just amazing. And we stayed there the whole day to do the filming, and I took photos until I ran out of battery. And it was very cold, but it was really, really a memory I will always treasure.
Oh my goodness. Gold Harbour is absolutely phenomenal. I know that feeling of arriving there and just thinking, what am I looking at? Is this place even real? How do places like this exist? So to get the whole day there and in a way, I suppose it was kind of nice that your camera ran out of battery, because then it forced you to just sit there and be.
Yeah. And I did. I just sat there, and the penguins that just come and check you out and then go away. And, I just walked all the way up and down the beach, and it was just amazing. Really, really amazing.
You're making me really want to get back there. Oh, such good memories. That's amazing.
And you feel like you own the place a bit because you're on your own.
Yeah.
So, there is not except for the other cameraman, that beach is so big. You're just on your own with this wildlife all around you. It's very priceless. Mm-hmm. There's nowhere else you can be in that situation.
No, and similar to a couple of the other experiences that you shared with us, that's something that very few humans will ever get to experience, because even tourists, people like me, guides who go on ships, we're there, but we're with a bunch of other people, right? So for you to just be there with one other person and hours to spend, I mean, wow, it's just,
Oh, and I remember seeing an albino penguin there as well.
oh, cool.
A king penguin that was completely white. Very unusual.
Nature was really on fire that day. It was showing you a bit of everything,
Yeah.
showing off a little maybe.
My camera was on fire as well.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, I only have one more question for you, and that is, if there was one thing you'd want someone to know who's considering traveling to South Georgia, what would that be?
Um, well, South Georgia is a place you need to experience. You really do, because, like I said, the wildlife there, the dramatic landscape, the remoteness, the harsh environment is something that not many people experience, get to see, hear, smell. It's something that you really, really need to experience. But there is one thing I want to say is these places, even if you go and land on Gold Harbour and see millions of penguins, they are very fragile environments. Yes, there is a lot of wildlife there, but this wildlife is also very fragile. You can because of climate change, like I mentioned earlier, the ice is retreating. These animals depend on the cold weather. They need cold. Penguins overheat, in hot weather. And also be careful introducing these pests that we are trying so hard to get rid of, the rats, the mice, the plants. So what I would say is, yes, go and explore South Georgia, go and experience it, but also protect it. It needs protecting. It's such a special place. We really need to protect it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, Jerome, thank you so, so, so much for sharing your stories with us today. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you, and I hope that we get a chance to have you back on the podcast someday.
Thank you very much. I look forward to it.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Antarctic Stories. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you have an extra minute, leaving a rating or review for the podcast will really help us in reaching a wider audience. AntArctic Stories is a production of Twin Tracks Expeditions, a family-run agency of polar guides who have spent the last decade working on polar expedition ships. We bring you unparalleled insider expertise in small ship voyages to the Arctic and Antarctica, and we love sharing our insider knowledge to help you find the perfect ship for your next polar expedition. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, or at twintracksexpeditions.com.